All right, let's focus on our conversation this morning on standing on guard, where we talk about all security matters related to the elections and away from that as well. First up, I want to introduce my guest, beginning from my immediate left, George Musami, security expert, and for the first time on my panel, Byron Adera, ex-Special Service Forces and security expert. I hope I got that right. And Dr. Mustafa Ali, conflict resolution and national security expert, and Major retired Sammy Mwithi, also a security expert. Thanks for making time for us this morning. We have a lot of things to talk about, 3 of them actually to be precise. The KDF being accused of not stopping the charcoal sale, the Kenyan police being ranked 3rd worst in the world, and the AU beginning to withdraw troops by the end of this year, about 1,000 troops from Somalia. Are they ready? Well, let's start with the first part. The Kenyan police are the 3rd worst in the world. That's according to a new international report. The World Internal Security and Police Index ranked Kenya at position 125 out of 127, beating only the Democratic Republic of Congo and last place Nigeria. The index publishes it aims to measure the ability of the security apparatus within a country to respond to internal security challenges, both now and in the future. They excluded countries currently suffering from protracted civil conflict or those with insufficient data. So Kenya ranking in the bottom 3 puts in the club of countries with the lowest level of security provider responsiveness to internal security challenges. The countries in the last 5, but who did better than Kenya, Pakistan and Uganda. Kenya was 3rd last because it fared poorly across all the 4 index domains of the capacity, process, legitimacy, and outcomes. Kenya's 99 police officers per 100,000 people is lower than the index average of 347 and the sub-Saharan African average of 268 cops per 100,000 folks. 77% of Kenyans reported having paid bribes to police, even though 58% of the population still has confidence in the police. On the upside, Kenya's homicide rate of 6.4% per 100,000 people was lower than the index average of 8.05, so there are fewer murders here than in most other parts of the world. Singapore led the index with an overall score of 0.898 compared to Kenya's score of 0.298. It is the only country not classified as a full democracy to feature in the top 10. This may partly be because it has a mandatory national service program for all men when they turn 18 to serve in the disciplined forces for about 2 years. Finland was ranked 2nd with 0.864, Denmark was 3rd, Australia 4th, and Germany closing out the top 5. Well then, George, I'll start with you. Does that surprise you?
I think
and are you disappointed being a Kenyan?
This should not surprise me, and I'm not disappointed as a Kenyan, because even you, I don't think you're surprised by this. This is something that we've known for quite a long time, and that formed the basis of Agenda 4 in the Kriegler Commission, because we accepted that we have a problem in the police service, and we needed to reform the police. We came up with so many measures that were supposed to put into place to make the Kenya police a service that is accountable to the people. And we even went ahead and said that this is not a police force. Let's change the name and make it a police service. We've tried all efforts, and we talked about the numbers. We've seen a mass production of police from the APs, which what we've been trying to train 10,000 policemen every year. Look at the numbers. We say that we are going to equip the police. We've seen vehicles being bought for the police. We've seen new equipment coming in, but that has not changed the police to what the Kenyans want it to be, and that formed the ranking. To most of us, this is not a surprise, because if you look at the service delivery, starting from going and making a report to the police station, the kind of investigation that is carried out, people being arrested and arraigned in court. You've seen so many cases going to court and then being dismissed for lack of evidence. It clearly shows that the police, the Kenya police service suffers from so many hangers that we need to treat. So this, to me, has not come as a surprise.
Okay. Yeah. Byron, what was your reaction when you saw this?
Okay, I'd share in the same kind of analysis that George has put forward. It doesn't come as a surprise to me. Neither does it also inspire any optimism on the part of the ranking, becoming third from the bottom. It would have come as a surprise if we didn't actually make it there. I mean, if the report, I think, came a lot earlier or later, when we'd had all this, kind of shenanigans on the part of the conduct of the police, then I'd surely optimistically put them at, or rank them even worse. The highlighted indices have a lot to show us or point us take at in terms of capacity, I think processes, legitimacy, and outcomes. I'd want to have a look at it from this perspective. If you put something through a production process, and the police force, the development of a police officer for that matter, comes from or borrows from a particular process which is in the public domain, it's open source intelligence. Now, we actually hit by quite a number of, I'd say, disruptive processes that do not engender great outcomes at the end of the day. We know the selection process and the recruitment all the way to the training to the conduct of the force, for that matter, which would actually, be dependent on the organization of the force, the capacity, the resourcing for that matter, welfare, the leadership, the reward and career systems, are not ideas that to me would actually sound a bell in the right direction. If once you, at the beginning, you start off with a poor kind of posturing in terms of the people that you select to go to the process, you may not be very optimistic to get something that's actually ideal at the end of the day. And we know this has been marred by, quite large-scale kind of corruption. We know people pay to get to the service or into the service, and that waters down any kind of optimism in getting something that's credible at the end of the day. Okay. Now, we've seen the conduct of the force, most recent, and this is debatable, where you have what you'd rather call a professional service engaging in the shooting of cows. That can be discussed until cows come back home, figuratively speaking, because we know some cows did not make it home anyway. Now, that is not anything that inspires any kind of hope in terms of how the force can actually be optimistically called a force if they engage in such acts, as I know it. All right.
Dr. Mustafa,
Trevor,
what was your reaction when you saw this?
Well, first of all, what I did was to look at who is doing the measurement and who's doing the ranking. And two institutions here, the International Police Science Association and the Institute for Economics and Peace. When you look at particularly the Institute for Economics and Peace that is responsible for the research. Institute for Economics and Peace is a highly regarded global think tank that works together with the United Nations, the European Union, develops the Global Peace Index. It works with, or has been consulted by many other institutions that are security-based, that are conflict-based. The Institute for Economics and Peace develops metrics for measuring peacefulness and also calculates the economic impact of violence. Now, for the Institute of Economics and Peace to really place Kenya number 3 from the bottom is something that one has to take very seriously. And the 4 domains that the Institute of Economics and Peace and the International Police Science Association used to measure and rank Kenya 3rd from the bottom, including capacity, processes, legitimacy, and outcomes that Bairo has talked about, is where we really have to, or rather the National Police Service has to look at those 4 domains. And in virtually all of them, they've fallen short in that. And by the way, this particular ranking does not include the recent incidences of post-election violence, because these calculations and the indicators were developed much earlier until July. So
it could have been worse.
It could have been worse, or we should expect a worse ranking if they're going to release another ranking in the next year, unless the National Police Service do something that is drastic to change its image and to address the issues of processes, legitimacy, outcomes.
We'll be talking about those one by one and find out where they need to improve. But Major, are you disappointed by this, having been in this service for over 30 years?
Thank you, Trevor. First of all, let me thank you once again for inviting me here again. And allow me to send my best wishes to all candidates who are doing Form 4 in Kenya. specifically to Nyai Secondary School, where I'm a member of BOG and Matiri Girls and the Kiriri in the Tharaka County. And let me categorically say that I am not a KDF spokesperson, neither am I a police spokesperson. I'm just a war veteran, a military retiree officer. Back to your question, I think I'm not very conversant like my colleague here, Dr. Mustafa, in the rankings of the police force. I'm not very concerned. But to me, what I think, if there is something which is being said to our institution, then the police force needs to do something. But most importantly, and I'm not here to defend the police force because I might be said that I'm one of them, but we cannot rule out that we don't have rogue police officers in our institution. They are there. But quite often I find it not very happy for most of the institutions or people, individuals, always attack the policemen. These guys are doing a very good job. However, there are some criticism, but they are doing a good job. This is a policeman who guards you at night, who gives you security, but when anything happens to him, nobody comes out and defends the police. We have few rogue ones, but we cannot virtually say all of them are bad. I think they are doing a good job. I think they are going. If politics are not taking part in the discussion, I think our police force are doing a very good job. And where the credit deserves, we should give credit to policemen. They are doing a good job, Trevor.
George,
that's my
point. Is that your taking as well? The major says that maybe you're being a bit too harsh to the police force because there are few rogue elements, but not all of them.
I think we should look at the index that was used by the researchers, because they're talking about processes, they're talking about legitimacy. And when you talk about the processes, what are these processes that you're talking about here? What are we discussing? And I think it all comes down to policing. What is the role of the police to a nation? And my worry, from my own experience, because I served in this service for very good years, I was part of the training team for the police, and the process starts from recruitment, as Byron put it. Are we getting the right people into the service? Majors come out and say we might have a few rogue policemen. But if you look at what Kenyans go through every other time they have an issue with the police, you'll agree with me that it's not a few, but we have commercialized police service in this country. And this is why we are talking about the processes here. Only the other day, we had a person who had 8 pending cases still moving around. Warrants of arrest had been issued by courts. These warrants were still in force. And still you'll find that this person had the audacity of even facing media and talking about witnessing very crucial accidents. But still he was not picked. So what you're talking about here is actually we should accept that we have a problem. Let us not hide our heads in sand. And as I said earlier, we had a commission that was formed to look into several things after the post-election violence of 2007, 2008. And part of that, the report, the recommendations were that we need to reform the police. The reason for reforming the police is that we have so many gaps within the police service that needed to be changed, especially starting from the human resource. From the human resource, we need to look at the welfare of the policemen. We have also to look at the equipment. But have we dealt with this? We've not been able to achieve anything even after that report, because we looked at the what we call the vetting of the policemen. What came out of that? Did we manage to weed out the rogue police officers from amongst the force or from the service? We did not achieve that. We've seen equipment coming in. What have we achieved with this? We've seen that we were below the UN ratio when it comes to terms of numbers. We said let us increase the numbers of the policemen out there on the beat. We've been recruiting 10,000 policemen every year for the last 4 years. What have you achieved with this? Because right now, you'll still find that we do not have enough policemen on the streets patrolling. And if you look at the way we operate, operational capacity, let's talk about Laikipia. What happened in Laikipia? I think we are still far away below to achieving a model police service. And I'd like to bring in an example of Georgia. Georgia had the same problem that we're having right now in Kenya. And they took the bull by the horn. worked on the police service, and right now, as we speak, Georgia has a model police service in this world. So I think we should just accept that we have a problem and go out to deal with this problem.
Okay. And Byron, you're the one who brought up the issue of recruitment, and that essentially lies in the first issue that the index has brought up, which is capacity. Would you think it's about time we reviewed the kind of forces that we get in the kind of people that we get into the forces? Because also the other question that I've heard is that people who are ex-Form 4s doesn't necessarily translate to lack of intelligence. So it's not that we need people from graduates or anything like that. So how do we balance that capacity issue?
Okay, capacity issue is multifaceted.
Yeah.
And when the report, and I think I'm in disagreement with what the Major Retired said, that we have a very, very good, kind of force and a few rogue elements. I mean, the failures that have been highlighted by this report that is a product of an intensive kind of research. To say that this research is just something that you can niche away is more like saying that Albert Einstein was just a clever man. This is something that took quite a bit of time and investment in space and time to put together. And the sooner we agree and appreciate that we have a problem that needs to be sorted out, then we basically have a very bleak future with our police force. And I think majorly with the kind of people that we actually front to join the force. So it's not a question, as much as everybody would want to say it, that capacity is about having numbers on adding numbers. It's majorly about improving what we have and then making sure that the foundational force that we have is good enough to have any numbers that are on top of them being effective and efficient in what they do thereafter. Now, in terms of capacity, it starts right from the recruitment stage. And I said that has been marred by a lot of other things other than the fixation on the right scoreboard. So we are basically starting off the blocks from a completely different kind of what the process has put in place. So you have, and you may bring up all these other factors of if a Form 4 would be actually fit for the system or not. And I think what was highlighted in Singapore is the fact that we got a mandatory kind of training that more like what we had early in terms of NYS.
Yeah.
But then this can be argued this way and that way. But right from the onset, I joined the army and someone saw in me that I had the right kind of character to be in there. There's a very intensive process of selecting or weeding off the dreamers and picking off from a bunch of guys the best. So the best fit, and this is not just going to the market to get the best tomatoes out of a bunch of others. There are people who've been trained, so they have that natural knack for getting the best out of a particular pack. And there's matrices, okay? So run a couple of kilometers, you do as many push-ups as possible, you do several sit-ups. That is just the preliminaries. Yeah. And then other things come into play. I mean, when the US was faced with a need to get in more men to go into a world war fighting, they did not just say that we need everybody to come in and carry guns on their shoulders and go out there to fight, okay? And I think that is what informed what psychologists now call a critical incident technique that was employed by then Colonel John C. Callahan, okay? So it looked at how a candidate has that instinct at what he's supposed to do. They do not need to be the people who are going to get into the system and get themselves killed. You're looking at someone who's going to survive in this system, have the right kind of character and temperament to do the right job. So there you go, in terms of selecting from a bunch of any other guy, so you get the best candidate that would go through this training and come out of the production process as a best fit officer for that system. Then you go into the next question as to how relevant that training is. I mean, you could, and I think this is what actually affecting the force. Other people would call it, I think, a fortress mentality. That the closed in and they're thinking, we're the best. The bosses and the commanders at different levels think that we do not need to learn from someone else, okay? Tuckman in a journal, The Folly of the Kings, called it, I think, wooden-headedness. So fixation on a particular form of opinion or narrative that we okay, and I think it's also being fueled by other forces. Like if you get people who actually may be misinformed in a way or another, suffering from delusional attitudes, and who would support the force in what they're doing, okay? We all know that you do not shoot and kill cows, armed cows for whatever reason or for whatever case someone called them. And we've seen people, being butchered and all sorts of things, which actually not in line with what a professional soldier, professional police officer should actually do. Now, this comes to to place in the whole marketplace of ideas very dysfunctionally with what the force would actually be viewed. And here we have legitimacy, along all those four extremes. It's a score of, an E for that matter. Now, how legitimate in the face of the people, which is the national will,
we'll get to the legitimacy part. Let's handle the capacity, then we'll go one by one. The capacity, process, legitimacy, and then outcomes. And Dr. Mustafa, capacity. How do we ensure this is stepped up so that it's up on the international standards? Because capacity, like Byron is saying, is multifaceted, because you will talk about the training, we'll talk about the numbers, we'll talk about the recruitment itself. We have measures of which have to be adhered to before the recruitment is done, but sometimes that is circumvented one way or another depending on who you know.
Yeah, Trevor, just focusing on capacity as one of the four domains that the Institute for Economics and Peace and the International Police Science Association have raised. I think we need to look at that. First of all, I agree with all my colleagues have said. We need to look at that as something that is going to help the police. So the police service should study that index and the report very carefully, because when they are talking about capacity, they are talking about capacity from a number, or rather bringing out a number of issues. Now, the key one here, and this is important, and this is what, this should not be blamed on the police itself. And here it is, the equipment and the building of the capacity for police to investigate and close cases for murder, for example, the forensic laboratories. Now, if you recall that monies were allocated to actually build a forensic laboratory to help build the police capacity way back in early 2002, 3, 4, 5. Probably the entire of that monies were actually pocketed in the famous Anglo-leasing corruption scandals. And that in itself then tells you that the police have not been able to actually investigate crimes successfully to a point where then the prosecutors can prosecute and the criminals can be incarcerated. If you look at the United Kingdom, for example, there are many cases or there are many criminal cases, but virtually almost all the criminal cases that are investigated actually are prosecuted. Some are dismissed at the court, but majority of those criminals actually are taken to task. There's one shire in the United Kingdom that is famous for prosecuting successfully 98% of all murders in the United Kingdom. This is a shire in the United Kingdom. Can you say of the same in Kenya? If somebody is murdered somewhere, do we, or rather, do we see majority of murder cases successfully prosecuted in our court, through our court system? The answer is no. In Japan, you would find hardly a single murder that is not successfully prosecuted. Now, this is part of the capacity that we are talking about. For a police officer, for a detective to successfully investigate, they need equipment. They need to have the capacity to do that. And so we should not blame the police entirely in this particular aspect, but we need to blame the system. We need to blame the corruption within the system that also denies the police the equipment and the capacity to be able to do their work properly. Now, the issue of corruption, so that is systemic. It is within the police force. We have the National Police Service has got to take full responsibility for that. And so that has besides the lack of the equipment and capacity to investigate, the corruption itself has pummeled the police force service. It has kind of incapacitated the police force, because then they are not able to look at issues objectively. And so their capacity is brought down, way down, because of a number or a multiplicity of issues that deals with capacity. What that index has done is to basically measure some of those.
Retired Major, you've been there before. How bad was the issue of resources?
were in the police force.
Yes.
Trevor have not been in the police force. I think I indicated I am a retiree from KDF.
Yes, but you understand the entire
I
system.
understand the entire.
Yes.
But my main issue here is we are really condemning the police force. I said earlier, we have rogue, few, not many, who can be found in any other institutions. I think with the capacity, we have reforms which are ongoing. We have changes which are going on. We have had IPOA, we have had community policing, although it's not done in the best way it should be done. These changes will be gradually. They'll take some time. They'll take some time for the police force to change,
Yeah.
to a standard level where a mwananchi will appreciate their services. But up to now, Trevor, I agree with you, they are doing a good job. They're doing in spite of the rankings we are hearing, they are doing a job. I think this narrative comes from the civilians, we wananchi. When we want to break the law, we always want to defend ourselves. Imagine, Trevor, a mwananchi who should abide by our constitution, the rule of law, takes a stone and throws to that policeman. Who is guarding him? Who is giving him the security? A stone. And then this mwananchi says again that this policeman should use a rubber bullet. Why doesn't this mwananchi use a rubber stone? You see? Now, when we want to break the law, and this man is doing his work to protect us, there's that conflict of interest. And this is where I think most of us are condemning the police. I think what should be done here is to try and effect the changes that we want. And it is not the local policeman there. It is up there. The policymakers, the ward strategists, they should do something about this. We have a lot of good equipment to the police, and they are training on that one, and they are doing a good job. But when we want to break the law, and the policemen here defending the same law, what do you think we shall say to the entire? We shall have a very negative attitude towards the police. And this is where I'm standing very firm to say that we are not giving the policemen their right, they deserve that right to be heard, and we are not doing a good disservice to the police. Condemning all the time police, even the NGOs, when they give out the numbers of those civilians who have been killed by the policemen, most of the time they incline to the civilians. They don't say, this policeman has been killed in what way. Up to now, I don't have any number, Dr. Mustafa, which tells me in the course of elections, last election, how many policemen have died. We only hear civilians have done what? I can tell you, I'm not motivating the policeman to kill. They are there to serve us and to protect our property and our lives. But if I was a policeman and you confront me 10 meters with a stone that can kill me, definitely I'm going to shoot you. I'm not saying they should do it. But now we are condemning too much, and they're doing a very good job. We are not looking at the positive side of the police service.
Isn't that excessive use of force, Major?
How excessive is
10
that
meters
force,
away
Trevor?
from
How
you,
excessive is
you're
that
supposed to
force?
be trained to arrest this person or incapacitate them at the worst.
But sometimes, Trevor, when you aim a gun at a civilian, you don't know where it is. They are trained to aim those areas which are... But sometimes they're human. They're not angels. What I'm saying, Trevor, let us not condemn our force. Let us also take credit to where the credit is.
Let's start with George, then I'll come to Mustafa.
I think, Major, you're getting it wrong here. We are not looking at the individual policeman. We are looking at the police as an institution. We are trying to be very objective here. The failures are there. The successes are there. Let us try and address this wholesomely. Because as we've said, I'll ask a very simple question. In 1972, the CID were ranked as the best second, just below the Scotland Yard, when it comes to matters of criminal investigations. 2017, we are being told that we are not better than Nigeria and Haiti. What changed? Yeah? We are not just condemning the police. We are looking at what can we do to make the police one of the best services in the world. And we are talking about capacity here. We are talking about processes. We are talking about legitimacy. And as we've said, when we talk about capacity, there are so many things. As Dr. Mustafa said, we want to do investigations, forensic investigations. We said we need to have a forensic lab at the DCI. Somebody pocketed the money. Who pocketed the money? Yeah? We're just trying to say we need to look at the police. This report is an eye-opener to us. Where are we getting it wrong? The indexes are there. Let us look at them one by one. Do we have a problem with individual policemen out there patrolling? If that is the case, let us look at the recruitment process, as Byron said. Yeah. This recruitment process, is it done properly? Are we getting the right people into the service or not? We go to training. How do we train these policemen? When I was doing training at the GSU training school, the capacity for that training school was 360. We've not expanded the equipment. We've not brought in new equipment. Now, we are training 1,500 recruits. Are we getting the best out of these people? We are not. This is what we are talking about here. We are not condemning them. We are trying to say, yes, we have a problem. How do we deal with this problem? Okay. I think that is where we are heading to.
Dr. Mustafa, then I'll come to you, Major.
Yeah, Trevor, two points Major mentioned. One, I want to agree with him, and another one, I want to disagree with him. Now, it's not a civilian outfit entirely that produced this index. It is yes, a think tank, which is run by civilians, the Institute for Economic and Peace, and the International Police Science Association, which is a police international association of police. So it's really coming out of the police association or affiliation themselves. Now, on the question of, and this is where I'm saying that we shouldn't blame the police entirely. Part of the service, or some of the servicemen, are culpable, definitely. But we shouldn't be blaming the police entirely. If you look at some of those countries that are ranked in top 10, if you look at the way the population behave, for example, in Singapore, you'll find, or in Norway, Finland, or in Japan, perhaps one in 100,000 often break the law. Yeah. So people rarely break the law. People are not disobedient in those countries. And so even the rate of the international acceptable rate of one police to 400 civilian is pretty much acceptable and the norm, and it works there. Now compare that to a country like Nigeria or a country like Kenya, where perhaps out of 10, or rather 1 in 10 people have a penchant of breaking the law or engaging in disobedience or in criminal activities. If you come in a population where 1 in 10 breaks the law, and another country, a population of 130 million, 1 in 100,000 breaks the law, you will definitely need more policing and more policemen and women in that country or community where 1 in 10 is breaking the law all the time. And so part of the reason is that the police is also overwhelmed. The police is overwhelmed in terms of aside of the capacity issues, that they are not able to deal with everything. And so as a population, and this is what Major is talking about, that if we keep on just breaking the law and looking at the police as the enemy, and everywhere, every corner, we cut shortcuts, at each corner we are stealing something, we are pickpocketing, you are assaulting somebody, the police may not be able to deal with all these issues. And therefore, then we need a lot more than the 1 in 400 to deal with those issues. Yeah. And so some of those metrics are actually considered in the measurement. And so to help the police, Kenyans have to be law-abiding, follow the rule of law, rather than just breaking the law and then waiting or escaping to, not to be arrested. Look at the traffic. There are people who have formed WhatsApp groups to drivers rather, who then would communicate where the police patrol is, or NTSA, so that they can go and continue drinking and driving at night and still dodge those patrols. And Kenyans do that knowingly. So we have to blame ourselves as well as part of this community. But all said and done, the police have got to take a higher responsibility for this.
Byron, should we talk about the people now, because they seem to be the ones fostering this? One of the issues that was brought up in this index was corruption It's the people, it's the citizen who give out that money.
Absolutely, and it's well beyond corruption. It's a lot of other things apart from just money changing hands. Yeah. It's a couple of other things. I mean, as we drag along in the service, we would have a relative call you, when these recruitments come up and they mention something like, we have this boy back home. Basically, he didn't perform that well, but he's now gotten himself into drugs and some very bad kind of relationships here and there. We think he's fit for the army. We think he's fit for the police. Yeah. So part of the problem and where you get the cannon fodder, I mean the raw material to go through the production process, be it the police or the army, has a lot to do with what the society in general. And again, I'd want to mention that we did not just get here by some kind of cosmic drama. It's a lot of other things. It's a confluence of several other things. Ideally, I'd want to weigh in on how the police is actually postured and their job description. To say that if when someone is facing a situation where he's got to now squeeze that trigger, that it can be something that is symptomatic to a level of carelessness is to actually miss the point. Professional training of a security operator, for that matter, ensures that you are actually at a certain level of professionalism, be it marksmanship, be it that split-second judgment that may mean a lot, because in this particular trade, a life might be lost. Okay, and the situation I think we're talking about here, and I think which the research really capitalized on and got off this kind of a measurement is not the very many, if you wish, success stories. It's the ones that got us to a point where they thought this is failing, and it's not just failing; it's failing catastrophically. To get a level where you ranked as an E, the failing is in large scale. We're starting off from that block, that the failing is large scale. And so if it's large scale, it's not a few rogue elements in the force that are actually contributing to this kind of judgment at the end of the day. It's a lot of people who come together, and it's an organization for that matter. May not be written in any kind of a training or educational catalog that George, trained people off, okay? But it's something that's been coined because we do not have that authenticity. And we know in any kind of involvement, if it has to be professional at the end of the day, there's got to be authenticity. You're not going to be using a pinhole camera right now at NTV and you expect to have some very great viewership at the end of the day. It's got to be something that's going to be very consistent with what you want to achieve at the end of the day, okay? We now know with the level of corruption, yes, the populace is to blame. Because if someone were to stick their hand up in the air and say, like, I'm totally incorruptible, I don't want to go through all the processes of prosecution if I'm caught, on the wrong side of things, rather than pay someone 1,000 shillings or 2,000 shillings before I get to that point, then we definitely are going to get somewhere, okay? But that is a very ambitious kind of step that's got to be taken, and it depends on our culture. I mean, Kenya is reeling in a very bad inertia in terms of what, if you think about the culture that we've actually schooled ourselves in or socialized ourselves in. Okay, now we get to a point where we're thinking the people that need to take a higher kind of position that are charged with this job of restoration of law and order, keeping of that law and order, safety and security of property and lives, are actually taking steps that are going to be dysfunctional to what they want to achieve at the end of the day. How would killing or shooting at cows at the end of the day going to play out in the marketplace of ideas among the pastoralists, whose lives are purely dependent on this livestock, whose livelihoods, whose kids that are going to school are dependent on the livestock for school fees and all the rest of it. Now, that is a debate for another day, perhaps. But I want to just mention the fact that at the end of the day, when the force needs, what the force needs is a healthy shot or spirit of discontent from within. Yeah. Where at the end of the day, even as a single human being, you're faced with factors to consider as to how to improve yourself, or to do it better, or to lockstep with what you want to address realistically, then it needs a lot of introspection. At again say, so reappraisal of the force, look at this kind of report, obviously with a pinch of salt, but then it's something that should point them in the right direction. Yes,
and Major, I'll start with you for your final sentiment on this issue of the police ranking. What way forward then?
I think, Trevor, let's agree, like my colleagues have said, there's a problem in the police force, which emanates maybe from the capacity building, the top commanders there, they're administrating the whole institution. And let us not forget that our country has a corruption problem, which is also embedded in the police force.
Okay.
Now let us look at the attitudes. Attitudes both for the civilians and the police officers. And let us dwell also, as we are doing about capacity and structuring the changes, let us look at the welfare of these policemen we are talking about here all the time, condemning these policemen. Okay. Let us look at the motivation that the country is giving to these policemen or women. Let us look at the salary. What are other countries offering to their policemen, like Singapore, you have said?
Yes.
Let us know. Let us look at their housing, family issues, the welfare of the families, the education sector. When we talk about their families, their children, let us talk about the health care, the uniforms. Sometimes you find some policemen here going with the shoes which are almost worn out. This man maybe is on duty throughout the night. What is he going to, the amount of stress that this policeman is going through. Before we analyze this report, and to me, I don't know much about it, I've not read about it, I'll take time to read about it, I think it's a bit exaggerated.
Okay.
Kenyans have been performing very well. Okay. To be ranked third, I don't think whether that is, there's something there. Okay. Could be political, I don't know. Okay. But let me say this, Trevor. As much as we are working on the changes, radical changes, to reform our police, to meet the expectations of the wananchi, let us not condemn them wholly. Okay. Because if you find the NGOs, these human rights activists, all the time is the police, the police, the police. Is this policeman or a woman? He's an angel. Let us also look at his welfare also.
Okay. All right.
And let us also, you people from the media, Trevor, educate our civilians, like Dr. Mustafa said. Let us not break the law. When you break the law, you are found in the wrong side of the law, you start complaining of the policemen. Okay. Our traffic police officers, there are few, as I said, who are getting bribes. And these bribes are arranged from the cartels of the matatus. They are there. We are not refusing. Yeah. But something has to be taken. Okay. And my last word is the commanders, the top commanders of the police force should actually take these reports and the reports of the civilians very positively, so that they can do their work properly. Okay. And my colleague has touched about the incidents of the Laikipia. Yes. It's so unfortunate that those cows were killed. And I agree with him. Those cows are livelihood of those civilians there. Yeah. I don't know, but I don't think a real policeman can go and shoot 100 cows dead without a commander. Maybe that is a problem of a command structure, which was issued at that operation. I don't want to say it. But let us also motivate our policemen. When you find a traffic person in the sun, in the cold, with umbrella, it's raining, he's there controlling the menace of the traffic in town. How many times, Trevor, you personally, have you said, thank you, gentlemen, thank you? How many times? Let us also learn to give credit to our police officers.
All right.
Please.
Dr. Mustafa, final words on this ranking.
Yeah, I think just very briefly, it is a systemic issue, and I will encourage the police service, the Police Service Commission, and the leaders responsible for security to study this ranking very carefully, the reasons that are actually given to put Kenya third from below, and isolate those issues that they think exaggerations, but focus on those issues that are pertinent, that should be addressed, and then deal with those issues, so that in the next ranking, Kenya would rank better.
Okay. Byron?
Parles back in the US, when in his book, I think, What America Means to Me, once said that every great mistake has a halfway moment, a split-second point where it can actually be relooked and possibly redeemed or recalled for that matter. I am optimistic that if this report is actually taken with a pinch of salt, as I said, then it would generate very positive outcomes. And those outcomes have got to be looked at side by side again with, I think this report may have some recommendations as to which way they are pointed. Those are things that should be looked at again side by side with the reality that is the country Kenya. We've talked about the levels of motivation, the motives involved. When all said and done, about equipment and capacity and everything, it's about that person and the motives involved. Okay, how are they? What's their orientation? What's their professionalism? What's their level of discipline? And all those things are personal, first of all, and then they get to a point where they permit the organization. So a police service, for that matter, can be said to be somewhere in terms of where they're going, professionally where they're going in terms of legitimacy in the face of those they're serving, and in terms of what they want to achieve for posterity.
Okay. George?
Trevor, this ranking actually worries me because it's an indicator of the collapse of the last line of defense between civility and savagery. And we should take this report very positively. For me, I'm not seeing anything new in this report because if you read the Kriegler report, it actually outlines this. And this is why we said we need to have police reforms. What is covered in this report actually was also covered in the Kriegler Commission's report, because they accepted, yes, we have a problem in the police. So what we should look at here, very positively, what did we actually manage to improve from the reforms that were recommended by Kriegler and his commission? How far are we? And I would say that we've tried. We've moved 10 paces, but we've moved 2 back. And actually, as Major said, we're seeing some kind of politics play in this. Because we say that let us have an independent police service. Let us have an Inspector General of Police that will also be independent, not controlled by the executive, but all those gains that were made by appointing an Inspector General that has security of tenure for the office were actually watered down when we went to Parliament and also changed the security, we came up with the Security Bill 2014, and placed the Inspector General under the mercy of the executive again. I think very positively, yes, we've been ranked 3rd last. What can we do to improve, move from that position to a better position, and looking at ourselves and saying, yes, we are here because of 1, 2, 3, 4 things. Let us do this to improve. Not looking at individual policemen, let us look at the processes, let us look at the legitimacy, let us look at the capacity, and say this is where we failed. What can we do to improve this? All right.
And I want to read a few of your feedback here on social media before we get into our next topic. This Abdallah Mdambo says, causes of bad security in our country is high of corruption, nepotism in senior management of security, poor work terms for junior cops, and also incompetence. And James here says, standing on guard, the society expects the police to behave like angels, yet they are not motivated in terms of money, plus poor working conditions. As we were talking about the ranking of the police force as a